It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I am Rob here in the Lair of Omnisci for my State of the Dungeon address. This is the game that took place on the 4th of March, 2021. The game, Dungeons and Dragons. Frank Mentzer's Back Me edition. The very first role-playing game that I actually played properly, sort of. I want to introduce my players to a good old-school role-playing game. I am familiar with the Back Me Dungeons and Dragons, so that's what we play. Plus, I have all the books, modules, stuff like that. The particular adventure for the night, I am running a module. Castle Caldwell and Beyond, which I believe is B9 in the basic series. It is an introductory adventure suitable for first level characters, and it really is one of those games designed to show players the ropes about common dungeon dangers, about the kind of things that can happen, but not something that's going to threaten to overwhelm them cruelly. Something that they can't really get lost in as well. The castle's exterior is mapped. The players are given a blank map that they can fill in. So it's a great way, I think, for training your players on mapping skills, and our mapper was up to the task. So, the group that my players have come up with are Millie Milner, who is a cleric. Sister Asfred McAllister. She is also a cleric. They are clerics of the light. We had Hacksaw Barnes, who is a thief. We have Gorath the Thrana. Gorath is an elf. We had Thuric Doomhammer. Thuric, of course, is a dwarf, a proud dwarf of the dwarves. And we had Rune, who's a wizard, magic user, playing Dungeons and Dragons. Now, all of the characters were created rolling 3 6-sided dice in order. So the dice very much helped them to determine which kind of characters they could play. They were allowed a reroll, and if they took it, they had to take the reroll. So there was no guarantee that anybody was going to get really good stats. And in fact, I think there were no 18s. I think the best anybody rolled, there was a 17 and I think a 16 or 2. But otherwise, the stats are mostly close to the average range. In basic Dungeons and Dragons, this isn't a huge determining factor. You can still play quite comfortably, even with small penalties, and still do all right. If your wits are about you, luck is on your side, and you end up taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you, even a character with decidedly pedestrian statistics can still do quite well. This was kind of borne out by the gameplay, although some harsh lessons were to be learned. So, when we started, the characters were all in the town of Eltondale, which is a small frontier town, really fairly close to the borders of the duchy. They don't have a kingdom, they have a Grand Duke, but still, it's law and order and civility. It's somebody that they owe fealty to, etc., etc. So, the town is on the frontier, but it's not terribly exciting. Occasionally a monster shows up and gets attacked by the town guard / Duke's army. Or he sends out a wizard to deal with the problem or something like that. For young up-and-coming adventurers, there aren't a huge amount of opportunities. The nearby caves are small and, hold a few rats, nothing too scary. Rarely are they allowed to travel with the army, so they have to take their chances where they can, and most of them leave town pretty quickly. But after all of the player characters graduated from whatever schooling they got, or were deemed to be ready to go out and adventure, they just all at the same time just happened to be there when announcements showed up all over the town that the great merchant lord Clinton Caldwell was looking for heroes to help take back a ruin in the wilderness to help expand the rule of law and to cast out the forces of chaos. Of course, basic Dungeons and Dragons, very important. The law is generally civility and decency, and chaos is not just unpredictable, but oftentimes very closely linked to evil. Now, in preparation for all of this, it must be said, all of the characters were made strictly by the book. No house rules for basic Dungeons and Dragons. As I said, straight 3d6 right down the line. But also, we had a mapper designated. We had a caller designated to help tone out any incidences of chaos during encounters. Not that we really had that. The system is actually fairly smooth with a group of 6 people can handle it no problem, especially if everybody is being pretty mature about things. But we still had one, and their job was to keep track of party marching order. We had somebody who just willingly took over responsibility for keeping track of treasure and loot, which was important because this is basic Dungeons and Dragons, and loot is an important part of the game. Your treasure that you take in actually is part of your experience haul. So I haven't told them that, but I trust their greed is going to get them there. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, so the great merchant lord Clinton Caldwell, and he is great because A, he's rich, and C, he's huge. Not tall, he's a big man. And he came up onto the stage that he had erected for his recruitment speech, and he's like, "I say, great heroes, you are going to be the voice of law in the area and making the world a better place, etc., etc." Now, bear in mind, there were a total of 6 adventurers ready to adventure in the crowd. Most of them were farm boys wearing things they purloined from their parents as far as pots and pans to wear on themselves as crude armor. Many of them had fashioned wooden swords or sticks or clubs. This was not an inspiring lot. The adventurers stuck out as being at least equipped and ready for a fight or the chances of something happening. And even the magic user was scouted out by Caldwell in advance. It's like, okay, he knows magic. We'll have him go. So the party was all invited by the bailiff, an old shrunken man who seems to know what Caldwell wants almost before he's told to do it. Went around and, of course, he also backtalks a little bit, but he gathered up the heroes and invited them to move up towards the stage. The others were all cast back, where they were given proper shields and proper swords. Sort of. The shields were really the lids of barrels, and the swords were basically fairly crude short swords. Most of their job was going to be walking in along the roadways and smacking their shield with their swords to let monsters know that they're not welcome and that the rule of law is coming to drive them away. The party got a chuckle out of that. Now, they were invited to go up and talk to Caldwell himself, and he told them that he had heard about them and that he wanted to have them do something special. He had purchased a small castle, and it was his intention to clear it out because it had been occupied by who knows what. But he wanted them to clear it out so that he could move in and begin building a village and spreading civilization through the area. He has the money to buy the castle outright. He has the money to afford the people and infrastructure that he needs to do it, but he needs a tip of the spear. He needs somebody to clear the castle so that it's safe for him first. And just happened to be 6 adventurers, right as rain, ready to go, right? So they were invited to do this, and they accepted. He gave them a rather generous offer of 25 gold pieces each on successful completion of the mission, a 20% discount on the item of their choice afterwards, which, hey, if you're going to go get plate mail armor that costs 60 gold, that's going to save you 12 gold. And for starting adventures, that's not bad. That's half again as much as they were going to be paid in coin. Also, they were given a map outline, as I said before, and they were told that if they can complete the map, there's a bonus 100 gold in it for them, because that will help his engineers to lay out what improvements and things, and so he can start ordering and getting things ready to make the castle livable and his bastion of civility. So the party was very enthusiastic. They were led away by the bailiff to go to the carriage. Now, Caldwell had arranged for transit, an armored carriage with a bitter driver, clearly not the friendliest type, and a silent sentinel, a man in green with a really nice tricked out crossbow. Supposedly this guy is pretty darn good. So the group got into the cheese-smelling interior of the carriage, where they quickly found his wine stash. They didn't touch it, but they know where the wet bar is. And the carriage took off. Now, the trip out to the castle is about an hour and a half by carriage. And along the way, the carriage was attacked a few times. Nothing serious, and after every single time, the carriage got stricken by something, or a shout from the driver, there was a thwap. The guy with the crossbow knows his work. And they made it to the castle without being molested unduly. They were let out and they got their first view of the castle. The castle is a small castle, almost more of a keep really, with 4 towers on its corners with arrow slits rising up onto the towers. There is a reasonably decent wall that leads to a sloping roof. They were told there's an interior courtyard too. But all in all, the castle is not something that a person would be overwhelmed with climbing and exposing themselves to all those arrow slits. Although if Caldwell's going to live in them, he's going to have to get rid of the greenery that's growing all over the castle. Also, the castle is partially lit during the day because there are skylights that are still intact. There's actual panes of glass that have not been smashed or broken. So they're covered in iron grates and such, but you know, they still would allow light to pass through. So the party will be able to see to some extent. So the group went around the entirety of the castle to make sure there were no other entrances, and sure enough, there aren't any that they were able to see. Bear in mind, old school rules, if you don't spend 10 minutes to examine a 10-foot by 10-foot section, you have practically no chance of finding anything. So if there was a secret door, it would have taken them about 12 hours walking around the castle and getting everybody a check on each 10-foot section to see. So if there was a secret door, I would have them all roll, and if any of them rolled a 1 on a 6-sided die, they would find it, or in the case of our friend Gorath, he would be able to do it on a 1 or a 2 because he's an elf. Elves are good at that. But they walked around just to make sure there wasn't anything untoward. The castle is rising out of this new growth pine forest around. That's all going to have to be cleared eventually, but it'll provide ample wood for the construction of whatever they need to make. And all in all, they were pretty impressed with the defensive qualities of the castle, despite the fact that it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a really overglorified watchtower at this point that is unoccupied by, you know, again, anybody who would think to control the surrounding area. Now, they were told that there was a kobold spotted who came out and taunted Caldwell and company when they first came out to investigate. That's how they got the drawing of the castle. He actually got out and had an engineer examine the castle to see, you know, if he got a good deal or not. And he seems to be pretty happy with it all in all. The group got their outline for their castle to start filling in as they were ready to penetrate it. But they figured, after banding about different ideas on how to get into the castle, giving up the idea of having it scaled, which is something that possibly Hacksaw could have done with his climbing skills. But the rest of them didn't feel really comfortable with their options for climbing. Even with a rope, many of them are not strong, and certainly none of them look forward to a fall, which could at their tender age be deadly. So, limiting the possible bad things, they decided the front door was the safer option. Especially since it wasn't trapped because creatures had been moving in and out and there were no pile of corpses or any disturbance other than people having passed. So, They went to the door, lined up, got ready, and opened the door. They found a hallway, 20 feet wide. It's rather impressive, ending at a door at the end of the hallway, a T intersection going off to the left or right, and 2 doors immediately on their left and right as they were looking in. While they're doing this, of course, they're keeping eyes on the arrow slits in the watchtowers in case something was attacking them, but nothing did. Even they went all the way around. There's nothing in their manning that's ready to attack them, so good. Now, they did do some initial investigation, and they were able to see that there was a lot of just debris, dead leaves mostly, that were lying around from, how they got into the castle. People leaving the door open and such, tracking them in. And they could see through the tracks that there has definitely been traffic to the door on the right as they were looking in. The hallway was lit enough from the skylights that they were able to see, and they could see all the way up actually to the eaves of the roof. So they decided they were going to check the door that had been passed through. This allowed Hacksaw to break out his skills, and he learned how to roll percentile dice to accomplish his thiefly tasks. First, he searched for traps. No traps. Then, he listened for noises, which is handled by rolling a 6-sided die for a thief. He needs a 1 or a 2, he rolled like a 5. He didn't hear anything either. So the group's like, okay, we're gonna barge in. Which, great. That allowed Thuric to boot the door, and they rushed into the room to find 4 goblins who were arguing amongst each other with 2 large piles of coin right in front. Well, that got Thuric excited, and he immediately challenged them. The goblins did not look immediately hostile. They pulled out their weapons when the armed adventuring party came running in, but they really didn't look too excited about the idea of a fight until the party started charging. Then they definitely moved forward to attack. And they tried to bottle up the heroes while they were by the door, but these goblins were pretty ineffective with their weapons. Bouncing off of armor, clearly missing the unarmed rune. The goblins were pretty hapless with those weapons to start out with. Then the party showed them how it was done, missing every time as well. It was a display of futility. After a few exchanges of nobody hitting anybody, the dice were stone cold. The best the party has hit were an armor class of 7, which is not enough to hit a goblin. Well, the wizard decided these goblins were far too dangerous, so he cast the sleep spell on the goblins. Interesting fact. The sleep spell affects a number of hit dice of creatures. He rolled 10 hit dice of creatures affected. The goblins had less than 1 each. The heroes are all 1 hit die creatures at first level. Everybody took a nap. The party goes down. Exactly as many as he needed to knock everybody out. Now, if he had done just 1 hit die less, 1 person would have weathered it. Most likely the elf would have weathered it. Elves are the last people affected, I generally rule. In nod to them being immune to sleep and other versions of D&D. And could have easily slapped his friends awake, and the party could have roused themselves, dispatched the goblins who were sleeping, and been fine. It didn't happen. Just those for odd wrinkles of fate. And here's the other thing. The sleep spell lasts 4d4 times 10 minutes. Yes! It lasts for hours! It's a great way to get a good nap. Unfortunately, they were asleep for only 50 minutes when the wandering monsters showed up. The only wandering monsters were a pack of 4 goblins who were patrolling the halls. And that's, part of how this dungeon doesn't have a whole charts full of monsters ready to pounce on the heroes. The patrol was really the ones who the party had to worry about, and they showed up and saw everybody sleeping. Goblins being goblins, they recognized an opportunity. So they stripped everybody in the room. Yes, that includes the goblins. They were going to make an example of these sleeping goblins. They tied up all the goblins, and they berated them soundly. One of them even relieving himself on the goblins to show them how foolish they were and taking their money. The heroes, they stacked up, and they were going to take them without any of their weapons and armor and gear, and they were just going to throw them outside the door. The goblins didn't really have much of a killer instinct, and there was a pretty reasonable chance that, you know, the party would get out just losing all their stuff, which for an adventurer is pretty harsh. But the person who woke up first was Millie. Why did Millie wake up? Because she got slapped across the face by the driver of the carriage. The goblin came out to drop her out first, and the fellow with the crossbow plugged the goblin. So Millie was saved. So the driver hopped down, woke her up. She was ready to go in there and kick butt. She had no weapons, though. At least the driver was clever enough to go over and break off a branch and give it to her as a club, which she took. So she goes marching back, again, no armor anymore. She didn't have the leather armor she walked in on. And she looked inside the room to see the situation, which was basically as I described it. The heroes are all in a pile, sleeping peacefully. The 4 goblins in the room are being berated and watered. And the patrol of goblins are now wearing the dwarf's suit of chainmail. It looks ridiculous on him, but he's got it draped over him. Another one is holding his warhammer, and the others have the various weapons from the party. Millie's mace was being wielded by the goblin in the chainmail. So she wasn't happy with this, but she was playing out her wisdom, smart enough not to go charging in to attack the goblins. Instead, she took a stone that she found and she threw it. She threw it at Thurin and hit him. Now, sometimes the dice tell a story. Millie may not be the world's most ferocious warrior, but she's good at hitting her teammates. She whacked just about everybody she threw a stone at to wake them up. So, inspired. She hit and woke up Thurin. Now, Thurin wakes up feeling drafty, because he came in a nice suit of chainmail that was his, as he ruled, it was his grandfather's that was passed down to him. The hammer was his grandfather's. These were all decisions made by the players, and I love that impromptu storytelling and background. He looked up, hearing goblin noises, looked over, and he saw a goblin wearing his grandfather's armor, and another one with his hammer. I just had him make a quick roll, a saving throw against spells, just to see if he took in the whole situation. He didn't. And his murder lust caught on. He was going to go over there and take care of all of them by himself. Now, bear in mind, as a dwarf, he's tough, and he had more hit points than anybody else. So, but he's not wearing any armor, and he has no weapons. So, he charged over, and he punched the goblin in the armor. He rolled well. He hit the goblin and flattened the goblin. It was a good shot. Millie decided not to jump in and help him. She picked up another rock and she threw it, and she woke up Asfred. Rolled a natural 20. It was, she rolled absolute best she could. It hit, yeah, it was natural 20. She hit, did not do any damage. In the middle of her dream, she was having a pleasant dream about being in the light, and she felt like she was kissed by a dove, and she woke up and, oh horrors, my armor is gone, I have no weapons, and oh my gosh, she's fighting. So, having his moment of glory, the dwarf, not only punched the goblin, but he went and grabbed the hammer from the goblin who was clutching it. Well, he grabbed the fist of the goblin and wrapped his meaty hand around the goblin's fist. So now he was wielding the hammer. The goblin was just a passenger. And the goblins were not hitting him. I Could not seem to connect. He also picked up a shield. No weapon, but he had a shield, so his armor class was a little bit better. And the goblin who was down, he went and dropped the shield in a classic professional wrestling maneuver, rolled and killed him with the edge of the shield. The rolls suddenly started working after they had a good nap. Apparently they were just tired. So he killed one without really having a weapon in hand. Did a good job there. Grabbed his hammer, so now he has his hammer back, even if there's a goblin tagging along. Now, the rest of the group was getting woken up by Millie as well. She woke up Gorath, and Gorath realized that, yeah, this not having armor and getting into a fight is kind of bad, since he's not, you know, the beefiest of fighters. So he wakes up Hacksaw. Again, slappings. Nobody moved to wake up Rune. Apparently, they blame him. That's possibly fair. The mistakes of apprentices. What can you do, right? It's part of the growing pains. But, yes, he got to sleep soundly through the whole fight. Now, Hacksaw looked and he's like, I need to protect myself. He went and got his weapons and armor off the pile. No goblin had worn his armor. And he decided it was more important for him to be protected than to help out in the fight. So he started putting on his armor, which kind of talks about what his alignment is and the care and concern he has for these basically strangers who he just decided to tag around with. He's watching out for number one, which I'll be very sad if I look at his alignment as lawful. But at this point, Gorath was looking around. He picked up his short swords and a shield, and he decided he was going to move in and help. At this point, you have an angry dwarf who jerks the hammer and slides the goblin off and finishes him. And at this point, he gets stabbed. Now, again, he's not wearing armor, so it's not that big of a surprise, but he's first level. The goblins don't do a great deal of damage, but they add up. So he got stabbed twice before the fight was over, and he's down to about half of his hit points. This could come into play at a later time. Nobody else got hit. These goblins are not great fighters. At least not in this encounter. See, the goblins who were tied up, one of them slipped out. He got out of his bonds because they were wet. And he ran out, but he runs face to face with Millie, who's got her tree branch. She swings, she hits him, the goblin yeeps, but he runs past her. She doesn't kill him. To be fair, a tree branch isn't a great weapon. It really wasn't shaped or balanced as a proper club, so she didn't cave him, you know, crush him or anything. So, eventually, the goblin who's left sees that he's by himself. The other ones are tied up, but at this point, Gorath is going around cutting throats. They're goblins. They gotta die. And it's easier to kill them when they're not fighting, right? Well, the last goblin decides he's gonna get out of here, and he runs smack into Millie. Well, he fights back, and Millie's still not wearing the armor, so he does poke her. But eventually, the rest of them just drag him down. There was some excellent finishing shots that were levied. Of course, Gorath reaped a nice bounty, but the goblin did not stand a chance against everybody ferociously beating on him. Also, we were using the proper initiative, so both sides roll a die. Everybody on one side, the side that wins, gets to go first. And actions go in order of missile fire goes first, spells fire off next, and then melee attacks in order of priority. And the sleep spell did preempt melee for that exchange. And so when everybody woke up, there weren't any more spells cast, so it was mostly melee the whole time. Although there was a little dagger throwing in later games, so we did get to practice with those rules, but mostly melee at this tender level that they're at. So, after the dust had cleared, several of the goblins were killed still bound. The fight was over. The heroes were a bit beat up. But to the victors go the spoils. They examined the treasure piles, and they found that there were 3,000 copper pieces. They were so excited. Basically 3,000 pennies worth, if you want to imagine it. Basic Dungeons and Dragons breaks it down pretty easily to the equivalent of a copper piece is a penny, silver pieces are dimes, gold pieces are $1. Pretty straightforward. There are electrum pieces that are 50-cent pieces and platinum pieces that are $5, but that's basically how you can imagine the currency systems. It's simplified. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons has a different exchange, but you know, it works. 3,000 copper pieces. Somewhat more exciting, 4,000 silver pieces. They got excited. Plus a gem or two. So, nice. But that's thousands of coins. Nobody thought to bring bags. Most everybody has a backpack, so they can stuff in as many coins as will fit around the other stuff they have. But they weren't carrying that whole pile of coin out with them. Again, remember, they have to get out with it in order to get experience from it, but this isn't over yet. So they know that they've only found one room so far. They have more to do. So, after deciding that they're able to keep adventuring, putting on all their gear back on, they go across the hall into the next room, which is empty. They explore around, practice their skills, which is good. It's basically a mirror of the other room. And again, the mapper was doing a very good job taking my descriptions and putting it on. I did check fastidiously on occasion, and yes, he was doing a very good job. So they looked through the room. It didn't look like there's anything at first glance, but after examining through, they took some time and they found a sack of coins. 500 silver pieces in there. So they didn't stop to count it. They just, ooh, big sack of coin. And we could even, with this big sack, fit a few more coins in so we can completely fill it up. Yay! Party wins. So that was all to be found in there. And in basic Dungeons and Dragons, dungeons especially, there's always a lot of empty rooms and sometimes rooms with unguarded treasure. It's just kind of how the formula works. So, not too uncommon for something like this to happen. So they left, looked down the hallways on either side, and saw that the hallways continued on either way, left and right, so east and west. They traveled only a short ways before they broke off into another T-intersection, one going off in a diagonal that looked like they were heading out, radiating out to the towers, and then other ones that were going deeper into the body of the keep. So the group decided not to go down those ways, and instead they focused on the door at the end of the hall. They looked around and burst into the door, and they found a man sleeping on a bed. He had an axe. He bolted up, and the group decided they were going to engage in talking with him. The man explained that he's just a simple traveling trader who decided that he was going to crash here for the night with his two comrades, who were sleeping in bedrooms on either side. He basically didn't offer them any kind of threat. He just said he wasn't interested in fighting and he would leave if they made him do it. He was not aware the castle was owned, and since Caldwell just recently bought it, that's not surprising. The keep was supposedly a place where people were able to get some shelter and refuge, and they were just taking advantage of it. They had actually worked with the goblins. The goblins didn't seem to be all that vicious. They were allowed to sleep in peace. But the goblins are all dead, so it doesn't matter. He said that he and the other traders would leave without a problem, and that was when Asfred offered to share the wagon with them and take them back to the town. They gratefully accepted, considering the alternative was being turned out into the wilderness. And, it was nice of them to offer the wagon. At this point, they noticed that his axe was actually quite nice for a common trader, and recognized that it was orc-crafted, something called fell steel, which is blessed by orcish shamans to be more potent than common steel weapons. Very durable and hard-hitting. +1. But I don't make magical weapons that boring. I mean, I give it a reason and a purpose. So even dwarves respect that those weapons hurt. So he noted the weapon, and the merchant said, yeah, I'm going to trade it. This is what my future fortunes could very well be based upon. trading this for a good cargo. And the party did not shake him down for the axe, I am happy to say. If they were chaotic, that probably would have happened, but they're not, and they decently said, okay, well, that's your weapon. The two friends were quickly rallied, and they agreed to go along with the group. They were just armed with short swords, and they thought the group was pretty decent for allowing them to get into the caravan. When they took them out, Asfrid vouched for the group, and the driver tried shaking them down for money, but Astrid forbade it, saying that she would cover the cost of their transit. And that was basically it. The traders went into the caravan for shelter, and probably will be napping. The group did tell them about the wine stash, though, so they might have a little nightcap before they go to bed. Who knows? But the group had more work to do. So, having cleared out 5 rooms so far, it was time to continue down the hall. They decided to go west. Going down the hallway, they first noticed that the hallway that broke off to the north was pretty long and had 5 doors regularly spaced out along its length. Another thing that they found out, too, from exploring those first rooms is that middle room where the axe-equipped trader was had another door that led into the courtyard, and there were windows. The traders warned them that there are 2 starving great wolves in there, and that most of the creatures that are living in the place know not to mess with them, as they are a danger of coming out and devouring anybody who lets them go. Although the kobolds that live in the place are just crazy enough to try it if they think they're going to get obliterated, so they're warned. Now, the group didn't want to go and deal with those wolves. They know they're going to have to, but they were kind of thinking of ways of avoiding that as a fight, because wolves are kind of nasty if you're low level. And they thought about, putting the goblin corpses, staging them in such a way that it will give the wolves something to eat, and the wolves will probably not want to stay in the castle if they are given a clear way out. So, that's kind of what they're holding their hopes to. Also, in case you're asking, why don't they stop and rest because they're hurt? Number 1, this is not 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. A simple rest is not going to get them hit points back. And they would have to rest for an entire day in order for the wizard to get his spell back. The wizard's comfortable throwing daggers. That wasn't going to stop them. So that's kind of the situation. They also, if they knew if they rested for a whole day, their carriage was going to leave. They weren't going to stay overnight. So they kind of wanted to do this all in a single go. So, first of all, they checked the tower. They looked into the tower, saw that the interior of the tower had kind of fallen on hard times, but there was no threats there. It was empty. The arrow slits basically let in some leather, so there was, things scurrying around, but nothing that was dangerous to them. So they cleared it and moved on. The next room they came to was the kitchen. And in the kitchen, they found that there are regular windowsills about 5 or 7 feet up in the air, and on those there's 2 windows letting in light above that. And in the kitchen, they really didn't find much of anything. The tables are, not a prize. There was a stove in there that is dirty, and they found that there's a pump that actually has fresh water to it, which is a really nice thing for the castle, making it very easy for them to get access to water. So, great. They were pretty happy about that. The only thing was there's a chest in there. A leather chest. Most people don't think of chests as being leather. If you want to think of it more as a suitcase, that would probably be just as appropriate. But it's a leathern chest. Ah, chest, adventurers. What adventurer's heart doesn't beat a little bit more at the sight of a chest? Immediately cries of mimic go up. It probably didn't help that I had this mimic door miniature. I don't know. But we weren't using miniatures. We were using theater of the mind. And they first of all had the thief go up. And the thief had ruled that there's probably no traps in here. This is a place where people live, and there's probably no traps. So he goes up and he asks if it's locked. And he looked it over, and it's not locked. So he opens it. It was trapped. Poison gas. The thief got a saving throw versus poison. He failed. He took 10 points of damage. He died. No negative hit points in basic Dungeons and Dragons, friends. You hit 0 hit points, you're dead. The gas hit him, he took a deep breath. Instantly, it was over quick. His skin blackened, his eyes rolled into his head, and he just collapsed in a heap. The gas dissipated very quickly. This wasn't something to fill the room. It only got the person who was by the chest. And I gave everybody else credit for not being dumb enough to stand near it when somebody was opening it. I probably should have, asked where everybody was, but I didn't feel like killing everybody. But yes, it only took place on the person who was in front of it. Another hallmark of D&D, there was nothing in the chest. People will trap an empty chest. So he died, and I allowed him to make up another character. In the glorious tradition of Dungeons and Dragons, we were trying to help him out. He rolled up another thief with a higher dexterity. So we were suggesting since his first character's name was Hacksaw, the next one might be Miter Saw. He chose Choke Saw. I'm not sure what a choke saw is, but okay. So he's rolling up his characters. Everybody was going along. The chest can actually hold 2,000 coins, so it could be very valuable for hauling some of that hoard. And after the trap has been sprung, there's really no more danger to it. So they add that. Plus, it's a valuable chest. It's worth some money. So then they go into the pantry. Pantry seems pretty empty. Except that as soon as they go in, they are immediately attacked. Savaged by a giant... the next one they opened into was a pantry, and there was nothing in it. Except for a dead goblin. The dead goblin had its arm all swollen and blackened, but it had clearly been dead for a little while. The clerics put their heads together and realized that it had died from snake bite after examining the disgusting corpse. Well, inside the room there was all kinds of bric-a-brac on the floor. There were emptied bags and just litter. So they threw in a torch. I mean, that's where you have a snake hiding.
Didn't throw it in.
Oh, no, that's right. Thank you. They attached the torch to the 10-foot pole, tied it on, lit it, poked it in. Good thinking all the way around. And sure enough, there was a snake in there. Spinning cobra. Nasty. But, woof, it died in the fire. Didn't have a chance to really do anything. With the extra 10-foot reach that the pole provided, forbade the snake from really getting a chance to spit venom. So, good thinking on the party's part. They learned. It's good. So, it died. The only thing they found of value were some of these empty sacks. Flour sacks, they're small, but they can hold coin. So, the party was happy about that. As a matter of fact, Thurin claimed one for his home as his prize. The next room was a library. The library had a carpet that was being gnawed on by a pair of fire beetles. Now, here's where things took another tragic turn. The person who said they were opening the door, the person said the door was going to be opened, was Thurin's character, or Thurin's player. And he said the door was going to be open, but he wasn't the caller, which means that he was basically volunteering to do it. And since he wears the heaviest armor and has a shield, it makes sense. And even at half his hit points, he probably still had as many hit points as half the party. So he opened the door, and I rolled for surprise. The party clearly wasn't expecting the beetles. They hadn't listened at the door for any noises or anything. So they were surprised. The beetles weren't. The beetles turned. They could use some meat. They charged. I rolled a natural 20. There's really not much for criticals here. Basically, it would have borne him to the ground, but the damage was sufficient enough to kill Thurin. So Thurin died in the doorway from beetle attack. After this, the beetles luck turned south badly. The clerics moved in to take the door. The clerics are wearing chain and leather, but the beetles couldn't hit. They were actually some of the tougher monsters that they'd fought and could not land a blow. If they'd have bitten, they could have done some damage and possibly killed them outright. But they couldn't land a blow. And then, that's when Rune decided he was going to make up for that blunder from the sleep spell. He started flinging daggers with precision, throwing dagger after dagger into the beetle until he killed one of them, even slicing off one of their glowing nodules on the side of its body and finishing it. The other one was beaten by a tandem of cleric bludgeoning blows. And, well, Thurin was down, but, well, the new character for Chokesaw came in, and he immediately started looting what Thurin had taken off of the body of Hacksaw to get his stuff back, which was cute. It's a little metagaming, but nothing too serious. And it probably would have been a lot worse if he just started rolling the body in general in front of everybody, that they barely even knew him. So immediately the player for Thurin started rolling up a new character. Roll the wizard. Marvin the Magnificent. Oh, Marvin will have a story, I have a feeling. So now they have 2 magic users in the group. Bless you. 2 magic users, an elf, a thief, and 2 clerics. It's an interesting group. So, they finish off the beetles, and they go into the room and find out that there is really no books worth anything in this place. The beetles, on the other hand, are kind of the treasure because the 2 glowing nodules on either side of the beetle's abdomen glow bright red, enough to illuminate a 10-foot space around them, and they continue to glow after the creatures are dead. So they collect all 4 of these. And Marvin comes in, which Rune is not happy with. He doesn't like the competition, apparently. And Marvin already has a personality. He is convinced he is the greatest thing ever. So they pay their respects to poor fallen Thurin. They roll his body. Nobody can wear his chainmail for an upgrade yet, although it'll make a good basis for somebody else's chainmail. Apparently he didn't leave any lasting requests that it go to his family or anything, so it's fair game in the dungeon, right? They put his body next to Hacksaw's in one of the bedrooms, and the party thus kitted out, and after they have given a thorough search to the library, proceed to continue on. The next room they go into is a storeroom where they are attacked very swiftly. As soon as the door opens, a giant shrew leaps out of the shadows and attacks. Because he just said he was walking in, it goes after Marvin the Magnificent. Marvin doesn't wear armor because he's a magic user. I miss. I don't know how, but I missed him. The group immediately rallies. They beat me on initiative and they charge in. Surround the thing and they dice it up. I mean, at low level with low level monsters, a group, when they all are hitting and their dice were awake, they were hitting, beat it, and even Marvin got in a silver dagger right to the skull. But it was, yes, it was, well, it was all fairly simultaneous, but the 2 clerics thumped it from either side, and Marvin stabbed it in the head. The shrew died. And that was where we ended the game. For the time. We will get back to this in 2 weeks, but it was a exciting adventure so far. We've had 2 characters dead. The players took it well. They have hopefully learned some interesting lessons about protocols in dealing with chess and the dangers therein. They're also giving a long look at any doors that they see, so those thief skills will be used from time to time, I trust, a little bit more regularly now. And the group is you know, staging on working together. They are using missile fire where they can to help soften up foes and setting up a front line. And yeah, so they're learning the lessons of old school gaming. Even when we have a critical, it led to an extra attack rather than some automatic double damage detail or something like that. It's a bit more fluid and exciting, and I think the players are enjoying it quite a bit. The not being shackled down with rules for everything and everything being quantified, very much open for interpretation. And like I said, I hope they're all enjoying it every bit as much as I am. Of course, now we have a few new people, so it'll be interesting to see how the chemistry of the group reorganizes. But with a new magic user, we have another wizard with a sleep spell. It's just how they rolled. It's not because I did it. And of course, our elf still has a magic missile spell that he hasn't employed. So they have some magic to defend themselves with. Let's see if they can keep going and put a bit more of a clearance on the Castle Caldwell scenario before they have to go running out because they're too injured. So to that, we will see. Thank you for joining me. I am Rob. This has been my State of the Dungeon address for Old School Dungeons & Dragons. Until next time, thank you for joining, and I will see you the next time I crawl in front of this camera and make one of these videos. Farewell.